Healthy.
Well, if no one's gonna drink this, maybe I'll just... Ugh, that's terrible. That's...
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I am Patrick Jordan, Chief Patrick Jordan, retired. And I am not only a 38-year veteran of law enforcement, I am the son of a police officer, the brother of a police officer, the nephew of a deputy sheriff, and the brother-in-law of a former sheriff. Law enforcement has been a big part of my life for my whole life. And here on Pop Culture Minefield, I've been asked to host a show where we look at cop-related or crime drama, movies and shows, and we evaluate or review those shows, and then we relate them to what's going on today. And to do that, I have a couple of guests that are here to help me out. And I do want to tell you the movie we're going to do is High Noon, and I'll get a little bit into that after I introduce my guests. Can we bring up John Baylis first? Retired Lieutenant John Baylis. John and I worked together. John's a 30-plus year veteran of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, retired. He is a California refugee, meaning he left the state to get away from the high taxes and the terrible politics of the state. He lives somewhere else. He's in hiding somewhere in a bunker. I won't tell you where he's living at. In retirement, John has had, whether it's a positive or a dubious distinction, of being in Facebook jail more times than anybody else I know. He's been very successful at upsetting the algorithms over there on Facebook. Hopefully, he'll stay in the lanes here on our show here on YouTube, Pop Culture Minefield. But John and I worked together for a very long time. He is probably one of the hardest working guys I know. And one of the reasons why I wanted John on the show is I've had chiefs on the show, I've had investigators on the show, and John was one of those guys, even though he's highly educated, he has a master's degree, and he taught at college, 2 master's degrees. Look at that. So he's correcting me already. This is what he did our whole time together, is correcting me. But John is one of those guys that helped me be grounded as we worked together. He worked for me, but he was the guy keeping me on the right path as I led a unit, and he's kind of got the blue collar work ethic. I really like that about John, and he just kept it real for us every time we worked together. And so I'm glad to have John on the show. John, you want to say hello and talk a little bit about yourself and your career?
Yeah, hi, how you doing? I'm 32-year veteran, been retired for 13 years this month, and just living the life. You know, got a new fiance and raising my grandbabies and having love.
So you've been watching what's going on since you left for 13 years. You know, and obviously there are some similarities to our career in, we had the Rodney King thing where there was a lot of anti-law enforcement, but it is really very strident today. Would you agree with that?
Oh, God, it's horrible. I wouldn't be a cop today, I don't think. Or if I was, I don't know if I could handle the BS from the politicians. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is overblown. Well, let me bring in our next guest, and our next guest is Chief Matt Rodriguez. Chief was on last week's show as well, and Chief is a 25-year veteran of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He retired at the rank of captain, and then he went on to be a chief at Fillmore, California, in the county of Ventura. He also worked in municipal government, city manager, and other positions in city government, and transit policing and security. Matt, welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back. And John, it's great to see you. I haven't seen
Good
you.
to see you.
I haven't seen you since your retirement, and I think I still have a bunch of golf tees that you gave away that night. And so your name pops up once in a while when I play. But the one thing I will say about both of you guys were the epitome of professional and effective, just smart. But most important, you guys made the workplace fun, and the work wasn't always fun, but I knew when you guys were in the building and you always made it fun. And in particular, John, I could hear you from 3 buildings down, and I knew that today's going to be a good day because John Baylis is in the house.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was great working with you too.
Yep.
Well, welcome aboard. As you can see the banner on the lower part of the screen, I'm asking you guys to check out the Los Angeles mission. I am still on the foundation board for the LA mission. It's something I started while I was still working. I had supported them in a couple of different pilot programs that were very successful, and they asked me to join their board. So the Los Angeles mission provides services for people on Skid Row. Skid Row has the highest density of homeless population in the country, in downtown Los Angeles. It is rife with people who are addicted to methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, you name it, and a lot of people with mental illness and other medical concerns. And one of the reasons why I support the LA mission is the LA mission believes in providing basic services for those who are living on the streets, but when they're ready to get off, they provide beds and wraparound services. And they use things like cognitive behavioral therapy programs to help change the thinking of the people who are living on the street so that they can ultimately get an education, get treatment, and be integrated back into society. It is a different model than what you've seen with the Housing First model, the failures of the Housing First model in LA. The LA mission believes and has been doing this for 85 years. And guess what? They do not get government funding, which is one of the reasons why they're probably successful. They're not restricted by all the regulations of government, right? So if you don't mind, go and take a look at their website. And if you're up to it, go ahead and make a donation for those guys because they do some fantastic work. So today we're going to talk about High Noon. You guys both got, John, a good chance to watch the movie?
Pardon?
You get a chance to watch High Noon?
Oh, yeah. I watched it last Friday.
Yeah, I watched it yesterday, Pat. It was great.
Well, this movie was released in 1952, so we're going way back, John. So probably when you were a teenager, right? And
probably.
And it stars Gary Cooper, and it's got an interesting backstory that most people don't know about. But it's a Western. It's set in 1898 in New Mexico, in Hadleyville, New Mexico, and it's about Sheriff Will Kane. That's Cooper's character, and he's been not the sheriff. He's been a marshal there for many years. He helped clean up the town, but the backstory is really very interesting about this. And I don't know if you guys got a chance to get into it. This was at a time when we were dealing with the Red Scare. We had the McCarthyism going on, and the Committee for Un-American Activities, and the director in this movie was Fred Zinman, but the screenplay was by Carl Foreman, and Carl Foreman was called in front of the committee, and he acknowledged that he had been a communist, but he refused to cooperate with the committee, and so he was blacklisted. And after finishing the script here, he sold his interest in it and left for England. So a lot of these folks were blacklisted. And one of the big controversies to this movie is John Wayne said it himself. At the time, he was a big anti-communist guy. He said, hey, this was just a very thin veneer of his own story where he was betrayed and people turned their backs on him. And we're talking about Foreman here. And John Wayne felt that this was what that story was truly about, and he didn't like it. He also didn't like it for another reason. He felt it was pretty un-American that the whole town would turn their back on law enforcement. So these are the real big criticisms at the time, and I don't know if I believe with his comment regarding the communism, but I definitely understand his comment regarding it's un-American, turn your back on law enforcement. And I think he recognized and others recognize you have to support law enforcement because they're that thin blue line that holds back chaos and disorder and allows you to have a safe community. What do you think, John? Were you able to get into a little of this backstory?
Well, yeah. In fact, right next to I watched on Prime, and right next to it was a review of the movie, and I brought that. It was done in the 70s, and it said it was really about anti-Senator Joe McCarthy and anti-blacklisting, but I didn't see that in the movie. But when I read further, what they came up with after, talking about the man you just talked about, is that it became a damning portrait of civic complacency and democracy in peril. Now, we're not a democracy, we're a republic, but you get the gist of what they meant when they're looking at that movie.
Yeah,
that's basically what it was about.
And there's so many parallels to what is going on the plot line and what is going on today, and the politicians and the public, some of them vocally turning their back on law enforcement, and others quietly refusing to support law enforcement because they don't want to be vilified or attacked or called names or anything like that.
Right.
Hey, Matt, what do you think of my setup? Did you get a chance to look at the backdrop of the movie?
I just saw a little bit on Wikipedia where it talked about that, when it was talking about the Red Scare and what have you. But what I saw in the movie was a lot of fear-based cowardice, and probably is equal as turning their back on law enforcement, just being apathetic and fearful, which is what we see a lot of today. People afraid to stand up for what's right, and coming to criminals, and especially in some of the rougher neighborhoods that we've seen, where nobody sees anything and nobody reports anything. So that's sort of the angle and the lens that I was viewing the movie through.
Yeah, and that's obviously, I saw those same things, and we're going to look at some of the scenes to emphasize that. But let me flesh out who's in the movie. So we got Gary Cooper as Marshall Kane, right? And he's a great actor. I loved him. I think he was in Alvin York, Sergeant Alvin York.
Oh, yeah.
In that movie. Fantastic actor. That was a great show too. That'd be probably a good show for the person who invited me to start this podcast, Gary, to do on Military Mondays. They evaluate military shows and go over them. But Alvin York, he played a great Alvin York, and it's interesting. The theme in that movie was that he was a conscientious objector, and his religious beliefs didn't allow him to go to war and kill people. And we have Kane's wife is a Quaker, and her religious beliefs, we shouldn't be doing gunplay, right? That's part of a theme in this show too. And a lot of that stuff existed back then. They were pacifists, they still are today, but I think they were much stronger back then. But I think to some degree, Marshall Kane in the show, and even Alvin York, he realized that's unrealistic given the challenges that the world faces, whether it's in war or keeping your community safe, right? The other person, this is the first starring role for Grace Kelly. She played his wife in this show, and beautiful woman, and she played the sweet. But ultimately, she turned her back on him, and then ultimately came back to help him, which we'll get into about how family seems to be the only people supporting law enforcement these days. Lloyd Bridges, a very young Lloyd Bridges, is in the show. And John, I couldn't remember. Was it Sequest he was on in the 50s and 60s?
Sea Hunt.
Sea Hunt. Oh, Sea Hunt. Yeah. And of course, he's the father of Bo Bridges and Jeff Bridges, who are getting to be long in the tooth themselves there. So he was a very young guy in this. I thought he did a great job as the frustrated and upset deputy. Guess who else is in this? What is it? Colonel Potter. Henry Morgan.
Yeah, Harry Morgan.
Colonel Potter from MASH. I know he played Gannon. I think he played Detective Gannon and Dragnet too, but I remember him as Colonel Henry Potter. And he's got a terrible character here because he turns his back on his friend. But there's another guy in here. A couple of Lon Chaney's in here as the former sheriff. Yep. You recognize Lon Chaney, that name, and Lee Van Cleef. Remember him? He's that.
It was one of his first roles. Yeah, one
of his first roles. But he also starred with Clint Eastwood in one of these spaghetti westerns, right? And that's what I remember him most from. And I saw his face, like, oh, hey, I know that guy. And if you look at the town drunk, it's an uncredited position. Jack Elam, the town drunk. You'll finally see his face. And I remember him. He was in a spaghetti western, I think, with Henry Fonda, and he was a great Western character actor as well.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly right. Well, I'm glad I brought you on, John. You got a great memory. So you've obviously, other than just working out, you've been working your brain to keep your memory strong. But
got to, because my parents both had Alzheimer's. So
all right. Well, let's remind folks. Remember, as you get older, you got to get to the doctor more to get checked out too. I was reading somebody had a massive heart attack. Now I can't. Oh, it was Ray Romano, the comic. He had 90% blockage. He went and got it treated, and he survived. And I have to tell people, guys when you start hitting your 40s, man, you need to hit those regular checkup with the doctors, get the heart checked, get everything else checked out so you can live a long and healthy life. And I tell people, I did 38 years with law enforcement. I got a pension, and I want to last 38 years after I retired. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'm going to try, right? That I want them to be calling up, says, when is this guy going to die yet? We want to get him off our retiree payroll, right? So Martin, can we go ahead and start the show itself as we do the slideshows, and then
yes, Chief.
And then we'll start bringing up the clips. Anything on the intro? Anything on the actors that you guys want to add that they've already?
No, just parts of the movie and things that they've said, but no.
Okay. So can we bring up the bad guys clip as we start the show?
Oh, I thought we were going to let me. And here we go.
Okay, I think that's it on the clip. I wanted to really do the bad guy clip. And Mark, can we bring up the Sheriff Barton's the news report of Sheriff Barton's shooting?
Okay. Yes.
Nope, the Sheriff Barton shooting, the news report. There we go. Now you guys probably all recognize. So this is an 1857, right? This is the sheriff of LA County. He's got a small posse, and he's going after I think it's Juan Flores is the gang leader and his gang, and those guys ambushed him and his deputies and killed them all. And I wanted to bring up this report. It says we have already. Let's see what it said. We already stated that Sheriff Barton with a mounted party started out on Thursday night to capture a band of robbers, and they attacked him near I think it was near San Juan Capistrano. LA County used to be much larger than it is now, right? And I wanted to bring up this report and talk about it in the context of the bad guys, because this was real back then. The Old West was a dangerous place, particularly for lawmen who were trying to keep it safe. And in this particular situation, several people killed his entire party. So this is the backdrop that Marshal Kane is dealing with. You can take that down, Martin, the Sheriff Barton report. And when you saw the bad guys coming to town, you can see the fear in the citizens. They know this isn't good. They came, 3 of them all together. They're there to create. They clearly have a malintent. They clearly want to hurt somebody. They clearly have a plan, and they're afraid and they're panicked. Now, what I saw in this scene was I worked a lot of different locations. There's something I read 40 years ago in some class, there's some criminal justice class, that there's a small percentage of people that will not be intimidated by police. They have a plan, and they're going to go through that plan, and they're going to do what they want. And we've all seen it in our career where gangsters, they're not afraid of you. They're going to challenge you. They're going to take you on. And that's what I saw in this scene. What do you think, John?
Well, I agree with that. The problem in this movie is everybody wants to placate the criminals, telling Sheriff Kane to leave, Gary Cooper to leave, because if you leave, they won't do anything, which is just pie in the sky liberalism bullshit. Pardon my language, but it doesn't work that way. You see it nowadays in Walmart and Walgreens, and they're closing all these stores in different cities because people come in and just steal them blind and nobody does anything about it. You can't let them just go by themselves. There has to be repercussions for everything. In fact, when they asked how he got out, the criminal in this, they mentioned that he was supposed to be hung. And then it says, well, his sentence was commuted. And then after it was commuted, then they pardoned him. So just like the Soros DAs of today and these politicians that don't want to have anything to disrupt their way, or they want the chaos and the havoc, so they have the no bail system in a lot of cities now. There's they're not charging any misdemeanor crimes in LA County. You know, shoplifting, you can go in and steal thousands of dollars worth of clothes and they won't charge you. Come on.
Yes.
So the same thing here, you know, the people, everybody, the judge who was the one that put that guy in jail, and all the wannabe deputies that were helping him in the beginning, they're all like, well, hey, if we just let him go, if you leave, he just wants to kill you because you put him in jail. Well, if you leave, nothing will happen. And that's pie in the sky.
And there are certain, you know, law enforcement or coercion to do the right thing works with a lot of people, but there's a certain class of people it doesn't work with. And that's what's represented in these criminals. And Matt, we worked at area Carson together. There was an area called T Flats, and there was a gang down there that just ran roughshod over the neighborhood. And this kind of behavior reminds me of that. They're rolling in. Nobody wants to challenge them. They feel threatened. What do you think? Think this is comparable in terms of their reaction to these bad guys coming to town with maybe
yes,
and other gangs?
Well, it's funny. What they say, history repeats itself, and it's kind of uncanny how the parallels between this movie and what really goes on today. And John touched upon it. You know, the prosecution. This guy was, prosecuted for a capital offense. He was charged. He was convicted and sentenced to hang. And then he claimed that he knew people in Washington, D.C., who, he probably paid his way or intimidated his way out of this, sentence. And then he comes back for retaliation. And it's like you're talking about Tortilla Flats in the Carson area. It's exactly what this is. It's a very small percentage of criminals that are destroying or eroding the life of the masses that live in that area. I still have some optimism toward humanity, and I believe that most people are good. But there's a few people, and when unchecked at the door, they will wreak havoc in your neighborhood, and that's what we've seen with gangs in Los Angeles. We've seen that all over the country. And then when you have, as John was pointing out, a liberal, justice system that is allowing them to have, unfettered access to crime, then what you get is anarchy and chaos. And that's what we saw in the movie to a lesser extent than we see in LA, but serious enough that people are, afraid to come out.
You're absolutely right.
I draw another parallel to what I see here in terms of fear of speaking up and saying anything. And that is, if anybody who speaks up for law enforcement or law enforcement officers who speak up for themselves. I'm pretty active on Twitter. You can catch me at LASD Jordan on Twitter. And every once a week I get the, ACAB, all cops are bastards, right? Or if I make an intelligent argument to some foolish comment made by somebody, it's called propaganda, right? Or if anybody supports law enforcement, they're called bootlickers. So there's a lot of strident comments that are to push back on anybody who speaks up or anybody who might want to support law enforcement. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show and I have you guys on, so they can hear directly, the public can hear directly from retired law enforcement officers of what went on for the past 40 years. And, if you want a healthy democracy, you have to speak up. It's part of your obligation as a citizen to speak up and act when appropriate. And, like I said, this scene, the bad guys coming in, people fear those handful of guys who are willing to do whatever it takes to control the neighborhood, control the town. And that's what I saw in this clip. Hey, let's bring up the wedding scene, marital bliss with the marshal and his new wife.
Short-lived marital bliss.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin. Now, Will the bride and groom kindly step forward? Will Kane and Amy Fowler, you appear before me in my capacity as Justice of the Peace of this township.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, just to tell my guests, one of the reasons why I have to break it up to is avoid copyright issues, right? So we have to break up the scene. And let me lay this out a little bit for our listening audience. So it's, we've had the bad guys come to town, and now they go to a scene where Marshall Kane is marrying his new wife. And obviously it's wedding bliss. He's happy. He's happy that this happened. He's got a beautiful wife. I'd be happy with her too. And all the people around him, all of his friends, his so-called friends, are around him and supporting him. And one of the reasons why I brought this scene up, and when I joined the sheriff's department, I remember the speech given by the sheriff at the time, and he kind of used the speech a lot. So maybe you guys remember it too. He said that you guys are all, meaning to the families of the deputy sheriffs who were graduated from the academy, you guys are now all part of the law enforcement family, right? And right now, today, that's really the only people I think for sure that law enforcement officers get to rely on. And sometimes you can't even rely on them. This movie, that bond will break down a little bit, but the law enforcement family, it is a fraternity for us, our brothers and sisters who are in law enforcement, and our wider family. And that's the wives, the husbands, the kids, the parents, the grandparents, all those folks who support us and are there for us, even in our darkest moments, when we are getting very little support from the public and the politicians aren't supporting us. I came from a law enforcement family, so that was actually pretty easy for a lot of them to support me. I know Matt did too. What do you guys think about that? Did you feel at times the only people that were really supporting you were your family, John?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, the family was always there, but things were different. When I came on in '78 and all the way to 2010 when I retired, just different. The feeling is different. There was always, you had the Rodney King and everybody was against us, and LAPD did this and that, and there were some mistakes. Yeah. And one thing I found online when we see a shooting and all our deputies and sergeants, retired people that get in there and comment, 99% of them are spot on. We call out the bad cops. We call out a bad shooting, call out a good shooting. And we explain why it's a good shooting. And there's a lot of people out there that, we're just trying to cover it up and everything else. But today is different than when it was when we were in patrol and serving search warrants and everything else. I thought there was a lot more, especially like when we took over Long Beach in that one section. It was all that political stuff where we're going to bring the sheriffs in for a couple of years. And those people loved us down there. They hated to see us go. And the people that actually live in the so-called ghettos or the South LA or Southwest LA, Southeast, whatever, most of those people can't get out because of economic reasons and everything else. But most of them are hardworking people. It's the gangs that are the problem. So there's a lot of people that do support us. But the problem is now the media, the left, they're getting so bad that they don't show both sides. I remember growing up, Walter Cronkite, who's a liberal, but he showed both sides of the story. You got to make up your own decision. Today, they don't show you both sides. They just tell you what you're going to learn. And it's not always correct. In fact, most of the time it's not.
So it's not media, it's propaganda is what I'm hearing from you.
Exactly.
Matt, do you ever feel that was only your family that was supporting you, or do you see a change? And that's where we're looking at now, that's where we're at now versus when we were all working.
No, my family always supported us, and my oldest son's a deputy now too. But I think nowadays it's only family. It's gotten so bad out there, but there are enclaves of people that get online and support the blue line and the red line.
Yeah, Matt,
but
what do you think?
Nowhere near like it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think, having grown up in a law enforcement family, my dad being a sergeant, my brother being a sergeant, that I never felt that the law enforcement community was vilified, at least growing up. And then when I, became a deputy myself, yeah, we had people that didn't like us. We know that. And then, you know, we all worked through the Rodney King riots. And the big difference between what happened in 1992 and what happens today in George Floyd and other uprisings is the organization of the counter groups, the groups against law enforcement. They're organized and they're well funded, and they communicate through social media. So it became like a social phenomenon to be anti-cop, to vilify the police. Black Lives Matter was organized. It was funded with millions of dollars. And when you saw the marches and the you know, the chaos, there was people of all races involved in that. You know, young white kids, black kids, Latino kids, and Asian kids. It was a more of a liberal movement, as opposed to when we were, you know, dealing with the riots of 1992. It was primarily focused in South LA. It moved, of course, north and into other areas of LA County. But what you saw during the George Floyd uprisings was very organized, targeted. They learned, okay, let's go hit Fairfax. Let's communicate. Let's go to Rodeo Drive. Let's go to the affluent areas. And then it just became a complete anti-cop rhetoric. I feel for the young men and women in that profession now. And I may have shared this before, but I have a son of that age, and I'm not encouraging him to go into that line of work at this point. He's too smart for that.
I don't blame you.
Well, what I noticed is John brought up the Soros DAs, so I'll get into a little bit of a rant about them and just talk about the lack of support of law enforcement or the changing standard that they expect law enforcement to operate in. We had a new DA here in LA, and Gascon seems to be going out of his way to file against police officers who were previously cleared in cases by another DA. I mean, in one case, he filed on 2 Torrance officers in which the previous DA said that was reasonable and justified the behaviors. Now he said, oh, there's new information. I'm really speculative that there really is new information, or it's just evaluated differently, right? And then you got the 7 CHP officers and the nurse that they filed on. They were trying to draw blood on a guy who was hopped up on methamphetamine. And even the coroner basically said nothing that they did actually. There were no injuries related to what the officers did in that case, but George Gascon still filed on them. You can head over to Atlanta. The DA over there, the police officer who shot the suspect who had his taser, and they filed on that DA filed on him before they even completed the investigation. And ultimately, they brought in, that guy lost the election. They brought in a special prosecutor, and that officer was cleared. We had another case over in Philly. Larry Krasner filed on a police officer there for a shooting, but knowingly, actually, he got a grand jury indictment, but he knowingly hid information from the grand jury and was ultimately chastised by the courts for being dishonest by omitting key evidence and key facts that would have likely led to an acquittal or a non-indictment by the grand jury. So it isn't just so much that social media is pushing back, but DAs around the country have decided that police are worthy political fodder, and it's okay to file on them to win elections like they did in LA. And it's okay to reevaluate and change because Larry Krasner actually wanted to change the laws, the rules for engagement for police officers after the fact to make the indictment. These are not consistent with our Constitution. They're not consistent with the Bill of Rights. They've decided that law enforcement's operate under a different set of rules that are much more stringent, which we do, but we're all people, and we have a right to due process. We have a right to the protections in the Bill of Rights. And I think that a lot of these DAs have decided that the political gain of going after police officers is better than, abiding by their oath and following the Constitution. So I just really am frustrated. And when that happens, the people that rally around you, for the most part, are your family, right? Your family and your close friends are the ones that stick with you. You'll see police chiefs, they'll do moonwalks backwards. They'll disassociate themselves, and some unions might actually do that as well. And really, the only people you get to count on are your families and friends. And that's kind of how I felt when I saw the scene. I don't know what you thought about when you're facing those adversities as a police officer. That's kind of how I felt about that scene. Those are the people you get to count on. And unfortunately, Marshall Kane didn't get a chance to count on his friends because they all turned their back on him. Any comments before we go on to our next clip?
No, I just wanted to bring up not the politicians and those DAs. And you may not want to hear this on your podcast, but it's all politically motivated with Soros money. When you get $2 million in your fund to try and win a seat as a DA, and you're expected to lower the bail, let people out, and then hammer the police. They want chaos, they want havoc, and that's what's going on. In fact, you were talking about, we were talking earlier, look at Ferguson in Missouri and Baltimore, Maryland, and even Seattle and Portland the last couple of years, where the politicians, well, let's let them blow off steam, don't go in there. And the police chiefs didn't do anything because they want to keep their job. Because let's face it, most people don't know, police chiefs are hired and they're at will. They can be fired at any time. A sheriff, except for right now in LA, a sheriff is voted in. You can't get rid of him unless he's voted out. And so they have more integrity and more guts to stand the line and fight against the BS. Where a police chief, if he wants it, well, you know, you don't want me to send my men in to Portland or Seattle when they're having their summer of love and people were being raped, people were being murdered, millions and millions of dollars of property was destroyed. And that's what the politicians want. But the police chiefs were cowards, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with that, and we'll get into it. It's one of the reasons why I believe that we always need to add elected sheriffs, which a lot of these groups would like to get rid of elected sheriffs and have appointed sheriffs, and I absolutely don't agree with that. And hopefully the public will hear that directly from us, that is absolutely a mistake. During the George Floyd riot, the sheriff's department, LA County Sheriff, was the only one that actually aggressively pursued these looters and stopped the looting. Hey, Martin, can we go on to the next clip? I got turn-in badge. Do you have that as a clip?
Oh,
okay, let's go to obligation.
Lawman's obligation.
Okay, lawman's obligation.
Let me pause this, and here we go.
You should have been a lawyer. I was cut out to pick your sword. Marshal, telegram. It's terrible. It's shocking. They pardoned Frank Miller.
What is it,
I don't
Will?
believe it.
Well, I like the scene because this is right after he's gotten married, right? And he gets noticed through the telegraph wire that they pardoned Miller, the killer, right? And he knows what's happening because he said during the trial or after the trial that he was going to come back, get Kane. But one of the reasons why I really want to talk about this is, we took oaths as police officers to uphold the Constitution and to enforce all laws. And I just see that sense of obligation in him. He's supposed to retire and turn in his badge and then go into the sunset with his beautiful wife. But now this killer's coming back. The hard work that he did is being undone by the politicians who let this guy out, which is so consistent. I mean, in 1993, we had 13.1 homicides per 100,000 in California. In 2014, the year they passed Prop 47, which basically repealed or relaxed a bunch of laws, we had 4.4 homicides per 100,000. And where are we now? I think we're at like 6.6 or 6.8 homicides in California per 100,000. If you look at our major cities, it's even larger in California. And I just the fact that this guy had done some hard work to clean up the town, and now these guys are getting released, they're coming back, and they're coming back for him. I just saw the parallels, and that we had a sense of duty and honor to make our community safe. He fulfilled that as the marshal. We fulfilled that as police officers operating in Southern California. And we brought the crime down to make our community safe. And now as crime started going up, we still have that sense of obligation, just not the support from our politicians, right? Which we're going to see in this movie. But I just see that he sees that, and you can see the concern in his face, and you can see the obligations that he has. Matt, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there was a line in the movie. I think it might have been the hotel operator when he said, this town used to be a lot more fun before your husband became the marshal, because he cleaned it up. And So the guy was basically saying that it was a lot more fun when it was lawless. And, obviously there was probably freewheeling, gambling and partying and whatever else goes on in Western towns like that. So it was obvious that he spent a lot of time cleaning up that town. But at the same time, when he was fleeing with his wife, his legacy wasn't going to be one that he ran and hid. His legacy was going to be that he stood, like you said, he towed the line, talk the talk and walk the walk, and he was going to die there. To the point where he even wrote his own will and testament, right? Because he knew he was out. But he had a honor, a sense of duty, and he was going to fulfill that all the way to the end. That was what.
It's called integrity.
Yes. Integrity, honesty, integrity, and commitment, which is something we don't really see a lot of anymore.
Nope.
And absolutely, you know what I mean? So, yeah, so I like that scene. And let's bring up the never run scene, Martin, because that kind of plays into what Matt talked about.
On it, Jeff.
Why are you stopping?
It's no good. I've got to go back, Amy.
Why?
This is crazy. I haven't even got any guns.
Then let's go on. Hurry.
No. That's what I've been thinking. They're making me run. I've never run from anybody before.
So this kind of builds on let me talk to our audience who's just listening online. So the previous scene was after the wedding. Marshall Kane gets notified that the killer is coming, that was freed, and he's probably coming to town. His buddies are already there. He knows what's coming. He knows he's going to have to deal with this killer gang again. And everybody encourages him to leave. Get out of town. It'll be okay. It's not your obligation. We got a new marshal coming. Get out of town. And so he takes off and he gets out of town, and he I don't know how far he gets out of town, and he turns around and says, I can't do this. They won't have a new marshal right away. These guys are killers. They clearly have malintent. They clearly have some bad things on their mind. I have to go back and fulfill my obligation to do the right thing and help protect my friends. But also he realizes he doesn't want to. I mean, this is the reality of the Old West too, right? He doesn't want to be caught on the plains, him and his wife, unarmed, dealing with 4 killers, because they're going to come after him, and he knows that. And he's going back to the town where he thinks he's going to get support. He thinks his friends are going to help him face this challenge so he can survive to see another day, and him and his wife can go live in marital bliss. And he's obviously sorely disappointed, but that's what he's thinking. And I couldn't help but think, that's what a lot of us thought. Hey, we clean up the town, we work hard, we make it safe for everybody, and people are going to be happy with us. And my last gig as a chief, I oversaw, East County, East Patrol Division. I had 12 cities. I visited with all the city managers when I first took over, and I asked them they were all very happy with our performance. I had 6 sheriff stations, 6 captains overseeing that, and everybody was very happy with our performance. Yet their belief that we're doing a good job and their support for us doesn't seem to hit the mass media, as John talks about. It's suppressed. What people actually believe with is suppressed. And I actually do believe, in the end, a lot of those people will speak up in support of law enforcement. We're starting to see that now, a little bit of pushback in LA County. But this is what Kane expected. He expected that those people will stand by him in his worst possible time. And I think that should be reasonable on, because we are making the sacrifice. We're the thin blue line for the community. Yeah, what do you think, John?
No, I totally agree with you. He was stunned at the way that they treated him, and the way nobody wanted to get involved. Everybody wanted him just leave. You only got one more day. The new sheriff will be here tomorrow, but he's a man of integrity. And he did what he needed to be done.
Well, he makes a comment in this: never run. I've never run. I think he said something like, I'll never run from something. I've never run before. I'm not going to do that now, right? So that's the integrity you're talking about. That's the personal commitment that he's made. And that's the personal commitment that a lot of police officers make, and they're sorely disappointed with how politicians' lack of support. Matt, you made that commercial, that personal commitment. Your dad did, your brother did. What do you feel about that scene?
Well, I think it's so real to real life. I mean, like I say, we see entire communities succumb to, gangbangers and dope dealers. And you remember they would just stay inside, shut the lights off, and hope it goes away. And this is exactly what we had here. A bunch of people that didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to support law enforcement. They were fearful. They thought they would be killed. And we see that in real life, especially in the gang neighborhoods. And I can't speak intimately about it, but I'm sure that goes on in Detroit and Chicago and parts of New York and Los Angeles and all the big cities. It's just fear-based, and that's what I saw in the movie.
Every commitment that you make, we all know it comes with sacrifice. When you make these commitments, you have to give a little bit of yourself to fulfill that commitment. And what I think that we're seeing today is a lot of people given, because there's a cost. When you make that commitment, you think, okay, well, here's the cost of making that commitment. I run the risk of being seriously injured or killed. I run the risk of running afoul to laws that are sometimes confusing or not easily understood, which could cause some liabilities for me, both criminally and civilly. I run a lot of risk being a police officer, but I'm willing to do that because I have a commitment to my community. I believe in doing the right thing. I want to make sure my community is safe. But less and less people are willing to take that risk, to take on the role of a police officer, a deputy sheriff, an agent, whatever, a marshal, whatever it is. They're unwilling to make those commitments because the cost has become so high for individual police officers. And I think it really is the game of the left to make it personally costly so that people don't want to do law enforcement because they don't believe that law enforcement is the right model for keeping communities safe. And as I go back to the first scene, there are certain people who will not change their behavior unless they're coerced to change their behavior. But a lot more people today, a lot of the cities, I think I saw LAPD was paying a pretty hefty signing bonus just to get people to get through the academy and filled out their ranks. And so I think the cost of being a police officer, the cost of holding back that thin blue line of crime has become so high that it's hard for cities, mostly cities, big cities. And you, John, you mentioned it, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Baltimore, Chicago. They're having a hard time hiring people. What do you think about that commitment that you have to make and the cost to you personally when you make that commitment?
Me or Matt?
That's for you, John.
Yeah, I totally agree. I made a commitment and I stand by it. It's kind of like I look at sports stars now, you sign a contract for 40, 50 million a year, and then the next year you want more money. Hey, you signed up, handle your job, have some integrity, and do what you're supposed to do. And that's what we do. A lot of cops don't. And some of these PDs now are also lowering standards. Some of these cities lowering standards so much that the other day, that one case of 5 black officers that beat a black guy
in Memphis,
several of those had already been fired from other PDs, but you hired them. That was just stupid. But, I signed an oath, and I still, even though I'm not a cop anymore, I still abide by that oath. So, I'm not going to let things go by that need to be handled. And, all my kids and everybody else, they're raised with a certain amount of consciousness and civil ability and integrity. And I expect that out of our cops. You look at the difference between Uvalde, the shooting, where the cops froze and didn't do a damn thing, did not go in. And hey, if they're watching, oh, well, there was cowardice. There was lack of intelligence in the chief. But then you look at, what was the other city just recently?
Nashville. It was Nashville.
Nashville. Thank you. Nashville, those guys were stunning. Did a great job. They didn't stop and wait. They went in and saved children's lives. Yeah, people died. Yeah, but they didn't wait. Uvalde allowed people to die. So when you lower standards and you have people that don't really want to be cops, but you're giving them money, here's 20,000 to sign up. Oh, I'll take that money. But then when it comes to the hard tax, they're like, well, I just wanted the money.
Yeah, they're not willing to make that personal sacrifice.
No. I wanted to be a cop since I was 5 years old. There were 2 LAPD officers that were assassinated when I was 5 years old, and I remember it to this day, and I always wanted to be a cop. And out of my high school graduating class of 500, there's 82 firemen and 3 cops. But that's what I wanted to do, period.
Did you grow up in a blue-collar kind of neighborhood, John?
Yeah, Sunland, Dahunga, and East San Fernando Valley. Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of where I grew up at. And, that's one of the things they say is law enforcement is really a blue-collar job. And I guess I kind of agree with that, although we've obviously educated ourselves and we've pulled past the blue-collar roots to get up into that white-collar kind of mindset. And the blue collar, those are people that have those kinds of commitment and duty and hard work. That's where we've drawn most of our law enforcement of, but they've been kind of vilified and shunned in our society today, which I think is terrible. And we just can't find as many people to make not only the commitment to law enforcement, but our military. Matt, did you feel like you made a sacrifice, or you understood that you were making a sacrifice, that it wasn't all going to be wine and roses being a police officer? You were sacrificing to a certain degree.
Is that for me, Pat?
Yeah, that's for you, Matt.
Yeah, no, it was anything but wine and roses, right? You're dealing with the underbelly of society when you're in that line of work. And I got a quick funny story. I was at UCLA and I was studying political science. And political science at the UC schools is basically pre-law. So everybody in those classrooms are going to law school afterwards. And I remember the professor, I think he asked everybody, what is it you want to do? And I was probably sitting in the back and I said, well, I want to go into law enforcement. I just remember the whole classroom turning around, looking at me like, what is this idiot doing? Right? He's wasting his parents' money. What's he doing here? Because everybody said they're going to law school but me. I said, I would go into law enforcement. And they just looked at me like I was crazy. And but I could tell you unequivocally, I would not want to be in law enforcement today. I don't want to be responsible for society's failures and then, be tasked with fixing it. And I'll give you an example. And then be vilified and prosecuted because I didn't do it to the level that people expect. And here's a great example. I don't know if you guys saw the Valencia town shooting the other day with that veteran. Yep. Okay, so you have a veteran who's sleeping basically or sitting by the entrance of the mall. And obviously he's got some mental illness issues that he's dealing with, which is very common in the homeless community. And perhaps he maybe has some substance abuse issues or some PTSD. And he's big, probably 250 pounds. And they send a 120-pound deputy sheriff to go deal with him, which, so before we even get into what happened, you're looking at the failures of society. You have a homeless vet who's not getting treatment. Okay, that's a failure already. Okay, somebody who served our country, fought for our liberty, our freedom, and then he's just cast out into the streets to deal with life, and he doesn't even live in a real sense of reality because his mind is playing tricks with him. Well, anyway, ultimately he's tragically shot because she's in fear for her life because he's threatening her life. Now she's being investigated by the DOJ. Okay. No, and hopefully I pray that she is cleared in the shooting. I believe that she should be because I watched it closely. My son showed it to me, but that's not the kind of thing I want to go through as a father with my son who got sent to that call to deal with society's failure. And now he's being prosecuted. That doesn't work for me. I guess I'm too idealistic. And I tried to look at this George Soros guy. I read about him. I looked at where he's from. And I got to be honest with you, I tried to reverse engineer his mindset, and I can't do it because my mind's not wired like that. I'm too idealistic. You commit a crime, you go to jail, period. That's what keeps society safe. I cannot cross that neurotransmitter that makes those guys operate because I just don't have that in my DNA. So I'm not able to wrap my head around it. Sorry.
Taking a certain amount of risk is okay, and I just want to bring up the shooting thing. So one of the shootings, the Stu Torrance things, is Jackie Lacey, the DA that reviewed that and said that they were reasonable and justified in their actions, said in making split-second decisions was some of the verbiage she used in that. And then that of course, got completely turned on its head with George Gascon, right? He's now filed on those guys. So she talked about the realities of policing split-second decisions, and George Gascon ignores those realities. And that's the fear, and that's the threat that police officers now have to take if they keep doing the job or they get into law enforcement, is a DA who's unwilling and unreasonable in their evaluation of the behaviors that police officers, the things police officers have to do in making these tough decisions. So I understand. So the risk is much greater for police officers. I understand why people aren't getting into that line of work. And it's unfortunate because it does mean we're going to lower the standards and we're going to see more challenges for police chiefs and sheriffs around there to find the good people to police communities. But that's also why we have to speak up. I think we have another a little bit more time before we go to our break here for one more video. Martin, can we bring up I Set Him Up, and then we'll talk about it hopefully after the break.
Okay.
I sent a man up 5 years ago for murder. He was supposed to hang, but up north they commuted it to life. Now he's free. I don't know how. Anyway, it looks like he's coming back.
I still don't understand.
Well, he was always wild, kind of crazy. He'll probably make trouble.
But that's no concern of yours, not anymore.
I'm the one who sent him up.
Well, that was part of your job. That's finished now. They've got a new marshal.
Won't be here till tomorrow. Seems to me I've got to stay. Anyway, I'm the same man with or without this.
You know, we'll probably finish this discussion on this particular clip after the break. So Martin, how much longer do we got before we go to break?
Oh, like 10 seconds or so.
10 seconds. All right. Well, let's go to break. But I think it's an interesting scene, and I'll be interested to hear your comments regarding the scene after the break.
Hi guys, this is Gary from Pop Culture Minefield here on KGRA, and we're leaving for our first break. I hope we survive.
Did you know 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? If you struggle with focus, run low on energy, or when it's time to finally sleep, you simply can't, this can all be linked to dehydration, and Fuel Up has the answer. Our proprietary formula contains the finest cellular hydration with the strongest immune-enhancing natural ingredients. The Fuel Up system is made up of 3 different incredibly tasting varieties. Wake kickstarts your day with a jolt of caffeine. Play boosts focus while hydrating your cells. Rest not only helps you relax, but also rejuvenates your cells while you sleep. Here's what our clients have to say.
I really don't miss my coffee, and you can tell the difference.
So I'm going to take it for the energy. I'm going to take it for the play. I'm going to take it, all day.
And it works. That's the thing. It works. We love it.
Take the Fuel Up Challenge now, where we offer a Feel the Difference money-back guarantee. Fuel Up for life.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Oh wow, we survived. Welcome back to the commercial break. Now for some more Pop Culture Minefield on KGRA.
Well, let me tell you what I think about this scene as for the audience as our guests are coming back. Is this is the sense of obligation that law enforcement have when the chips are down and things are going back. And I give you quite a few examples, and one of them's been touched upon here today, and that's the Rodney King riots in '92. In '92, law enforcement, in this particular scene, we have a small town, and he knows that the criminals are coming back, and if the criminals come back, he's got an obligation. He has that sense of obligation to do something. But there's numerous times in a career that law enforcement officers, they know they got to go to work. They know they have to do something. They know that they took an oath and there's this commitment. One of the first ones for me was the Rodney King riots. I was married. I had small kids. My wife didn't want me to go to work, and people were being targeted. People were being killed. Parts of the city were being burned. Parts of the cities were being looted. And what happens when that happens, right? Your wife wants you at home. Your spouse wants you at home. Your family wants you at home. And where do you want to be? You want to be in that car. You want to be heading to the sound of gunfire. You want to be going to where those looters are happening. You want to take action. You want to get your town back in order. You want to stop this crime from happening. That's what you want to do, right? That's where your commitment. That's what, I sent him up. He's saying, this is my obligation. This is my responsibility. I did this. This is what I took an oath for. This is what I got to do. Another one for me was the earthquake, the earthquake in '94. Remember that? We had a 7.8 devastated LA County. Some aspects of my house went down. I got hit with something during the quake. I had a concussion, and I had to go to work. And I had to tell my wife, "Hey, listen, I have to go to work. You have to snap out of this. You need to get a hold of yourself." And I had a few hours where I could get things cleaned up and help her get things cleaned up, get the little kid situated. I had, I think, a 4 and 5 year olds, so they were small. And I knew exactly what was happening. I wanted to go and help. And for the next 3 weeks, I worked 16-hour days every single day, right? And I know a lot of you guys did that too. And when the chips are down, when you have this obligation, I sent them up. It's my job. It's my responsibility. Everybody else is taking care of themselves, and you are running to work to take care of the community. Do you got besides those two examples, John? Do you have any other examples, or did you feel the same way about those events?
Oh, absolutely. Like to steal his words, Matt's words, we are wired different. When we make a commitment, whether it's be the way we were raised, our religion, anything, that our environment, that how we were raised, we're wired different, and we want to serve and protect that community. And we disdain when we see this type of criminal activity. I see these videos of one yesterday. Some kid got a big black bag and he's just shoving electronics and stuff, and he's just walking right out the store and nobody's doing nothing. I can't tell you what I've done, but bottom line is you want to get in there and you want to stop it. They were shooting firemen. They were sniping firemen during the riots, the Rodney King riots. That's unheard of, because those are the guys that don't put anybody in jail. Those are the guys that help everybody. Those are the guys that go there when you need a paramedic, when a house is burning down. But they shot firemen. We wanted to be there to protect them, protect everybody and the citizens. We're just wired different.
Hey, Matt, what do you think? You were active during the riots and the earthquake, right?
Yeah, I participated in the riots for 2 weeks, like you said, 12 and 12s, very little sleep. And then the fires, remember there were several wildfires where we were on, I was on the incident management team, so I was at the station fire, but there was Malibu fires and other stuff that we dealt with. The earthquake was a big deal when we flew up to Northridge, or I handled calls for service in Devonshire, LAPD's area, and then flew up to Santa Clarita and handed out water. I kind of felt like the good guys at that point, like we were really trying to do something good. But the grind that you're talking about for me was going to work every day in patrol when we were experiencing 1,000 murders a year in LA County. Every single night was a drive-by shooting, every night. And it was just a matter of time till you got caught up in the middle of one of them and got shot yourself or had to kill somebody. That was a heavy load for me to carry.
But you carried it.
Oh, yeah. I never hesitated. I loved it, actually. But, it took its toll, I think.
Well,
it can.
I think it does, right? Absolutely. It takes its toll. I mean, we had my last show, we had a guest who wrote stories about people who were involved in shootings. And one of the things that he gets into his books, and that's Robert Rangel. And you can take a look at his books at robertrangelbooks.com. And that he talks about the PSTD that officers go through. I tell you, I was watching the body cam for the Nashville shooting, because a radio show asked me to come and do some commentary. I did the commentary the day it happened. Then they asked me to come on the next day and comment about the body cam. So I watched the body cam, and I tell you, my heart was in my throat. My heart was pumping. All that adrenaline was rushing back for the active shooter situations I was involved in, the people down situations I was involved in, all those high risk things that I involved. That I felt the rush of those feelings come back to me, and I know that you guys experienced the same things too, because we had similar careers in dealing with these stuff, and you live with that for the rest of your life. If I see a news report of mass casualty incidents, it impacts me probably differently than a lot of folks because of the Chatsworth train crash, and most people don't understand that. But that is also part of the I set them up. I'm not going to run. These are my jobs. I take on these risks because this is what I've chosen to do. It's a position of honor, and I think that's partly what we're losing today is we don't have that same level of, we don't hold those guys in the same level, law enforcement, in those honorable positions like we used to. They're called all cops are bastards. And I just want the audience to know exactly the precursor to Antifa is anarchists, and anarchists they view police officers as guard dogs for the rich. So when they say all cops are bastards and they're dogs for the rich, what they're doing is they're dehumanizing police officers so that it's okay to attack them. That's what they're doing. That's what that's all about. And it's a strategy to make it easier for you to hate and attack police officers. But police officers, as we saw in the wedding scene, they're men and women like everybody else. They have families, they have children, they're grandparents, nieces and nephews, you name it. And they've just decided, hey, I'm going to do this good thing. I'm going to take on this profession, hopefully have a decent living. But I want to do something honorable. And even in Western political thought, I'm a political science major, Matt is too. They always held the Praetorian Guard or, the police officers in any society, the people who did that policing, to some level of respect and honor in those communities. And we're losing that in our society today to our detriment is kind of how I see that.
It's on purpose. That's what they want. I won't go too off the shelf, but it's the globalist movement with Soros, and they want to demean everybody, and they want chaos so they can come in and grab the power and control people.
Matt, what do you think?
Well, Chief, I want to plug another heroic act, and if you talked about the body camera there, I think it was the bank, right? Louisville, Kentucky. The bank shooting.
Yes.
I think it was Louisville. If you watch the body cam, the officer goes into the kill zone. He's in front of the bank plate glass window, and he gets shot off his feet. I don't know if you've seen that. He literally gets shot off his feet. He finds a position to cover. Ultimately, he kills the suspect. But what a piece of body camera work that is, and a heroic act. He literally gets shot off his feet. I think he gets shot, or at least a concussion, because him off his feet. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and he hangs in there and he finishes the job. And that's the guy running to the gunfire. But hey, Martin, can we bring up the next clip? I have friends. Marshall King thinks he has friends, but let's bring up that clip.
Oh, you don't have to be a hero, not for me.
I'm not trying to be a hero. If you think I like this, you're crazy. Look, Amy, this is my town. I've got friends here. I'll swear in a bunch of special deputies, and with a posse behind me, maybe there won't even be any trouble.
You know there'll be trouble.
Then it's better to have it here.
Yeah, it's better to have it here with my friends. Sheriff Barton, he some of those guys that were with him were special deputies, so I'm assuming they were volunteers. So that was typical back then. And certainly Marshall Kane thought he had friends. And as we changed, as we moved to criminal justice reform, I certainly thought we had friends too. But a lot of those friends are abandoning law enforcement, or they're at the best, they're just staying quiet. They're refusing to speak up because they don't want to be targeted them. And I'll give you an example. I was on the board for POPA, so the union, and they wanted us to help fund a fight to repeal, or at least repeal the worst aspects of Prop 47. And the commercial folks, the people, the grocery store folks and those kinds of things, they were supportive, but they weren't willing to put any money in. They weren't willing to put their name on it because they didn't want to be labeled bad or anything like that. But they were okay with the union support. Ultimately, we didn't, because our primary issue is bread and butter issues for law enforcement, right? And making sure they're getting a fair shake if they're facing discipline or hiring or anything like that, or promotions. It isn't to reshape criminal justice in California or any other city, although police unions do get involved in that. That is their core obligation. And what I saw was, hey, usually grocery store operators and all that stuff, those organizations are supportive of law enforcement because we're the ones there that help them out when they're being victimized, when they're being ripped off, when the gas-going shoppers come in and fill out bags and bags of stuff and leave knowing they're not going to be prosecuted by gas-going. We're the ones who are there with them, but they weren't willing to stand up for themselves and do the right thing. And, I realized then, hey, we talked about it. Hey, where are these guys going? This benefits them the most. Why are they expecting us to take the lead? Because they weren't willing to put their name on it. So I saw that. I thought that was a betrayal of the business community at the time of law enforcement, and they were the best beneficiaries. Now they're reaping the foolishness of their decisions. Do you kind of agree, Matt?
Yeah. Like I said, it's tough for me to wrap my head around this thought process, because I figure that everybody would want to live in a peaceful, safe, tranquil, quiet community. Why would anybody want to enact policy or elect politicians or fund programs that create chaos? I just can't figure it out. Again, I've tried to reverse engineer it and figure it out. I can't. I don't know what the end game is, but I don't like it.
Hey, Johnny B, hold your comments, because I want to show one more clip, and you can add to Matt's comments. And Martine, can we see the judge, and then the judge clip?
Have you forgotten that I'm the man who passed sentence on Frank Miller? You shouldn't have come back, Will. Stupid.
So here the judge kind of bails on he's leaving town, right? And I kind of see this as consistent with a lot of the people in the criminal justice system also pulling back and not supporting law enforcement. Basically, criminal justice reform has become bash law enforcement, hold them accountable, add administrative burdens on them, limit their ability to do their job. And all these other parts of the criminal justice system are kind of moonwalking backwards. They're kind of hiding from the criticism. They're the people who are there, our partners in helping to the war on drugs and the war on crime and keeping us safe, are kind of slipping into the background, hoping not to get tainted by the assault on law enforcement. That's what I saw in this judge clip and the previous clip. I sent them up. People not want to take a position. What do you think, John?
Well, I agree. The judge made he knew what was coming. He even correlated with the Greeks when they were attacked, and all the people said, "Oh, let them in, let them in." They don't fight because nothing will happen. And they watched them slaughter all the politicians and all the cops and all the military. That's what was coming here. But some people, their brains are wired differently. They don't understand. It's like these liberal mayors that allow people to run ragged in their communities. Well, what about the other people that you swore an oath to protect and keep in a safe environment? They don't care. A lot of it comes sociologically from when they were raised, whether they were raised improperly or didn't have both parents, and then they're ingrained with this racism stuck in their brain that everything's racist, because math now is racist, I found out on TV. But so when you have all those thoughts in the back of your mind, and then you take an oath, but then you don't abide by your oath, and you allow criminals to do what they want with no thought for the rest of the society, the largest part of society that wants everything to be calm and collected and no crime. Just don't get me started.
Well, we are going to get you going here because, I actually want to bring up the next clip, divestment. because it kind of leads into what you're talking about. Martine, can we see the next clip, divestment, where one of the investors in the town is leaving?
Then why did you send for me?
I'm leaving town. I want to sell the store. You want to buy me out?
Well, how much did you want?
2,000. I think that's fair.
Well, it's fair, all right, but I couldn't raise that much right now.
How much can you raise?
Oh, $1,000.
And the final clip.
All right. You can pay Sam the rest in 6 months, and he'll get it to me. A deal?
Yes, ma'am.
Martin, can you bring up that headline for our guests to see as well? The one about San Francisco Whole Foods. So as you can see, I love this divestment clip, and it probably it just blew past a lot of people that watched that movie. If you look at what's going on today, and they knew that, remember, this was released in 1952. They understood that a safe town brings in investments. Investments bring jobs. Jobs bring hope. And that's what they're all trying to preserve by getting McCain to leave town. But in reality, this particular person, she's kind of a woman of questionable reputation. She had a relationship with the killer, then had a relationship with Cain, and now has a relationship with the deputy. But she's like, and she has money. She's invested in the town now, but she's leaving. She knows what's coming. She understands what the town is facing. She understands that this is not a good investment. And the headline, this is for our folks that are listening, the headline is Downtown San Francisco Whole Foods closing a year after opening. Yeah, you can go ahead and take that down, Martin, now. So I could have got a dozen different headlines to show this is happening. Baltimore, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco. I mean, I could have gotten dozens and dozens of headlines, and I just chose the one. And that's I saw in this clip, she understood crime is going to go up, and my opportunities to make money and live a good life here are going to go away. So I'm taking my money out, and I'm going somewhere else where the business environment is better for me, where I can make some money and I can live a safe life. That's what she understands. And,
yep.
And Matt, what do you think of that? You know, do you agree with that assessment?
I think it's history repeating itself. It happened in Los Angeles. It was called White Flight. You remember that?
Yeah.
And it's happening in California now. You call them California refugees that are going to Nashville and Florida and Texas and Nevada and Arizona and all the other places to get away from this nonsense. It makes sense. Whole Foods is a very high-end market. And it's already tough enough in this environment, in this economy, to make it as a business, especially in California. And then when you have to deal with shrinkage because people are just going in and stealing whatever they want, you're never going to survive as a business. So that move in San Francisco is predictable. And we saw it during the Rodney King riots. They burned down the local gas stations and supermarkets. Those markets never rebuilt. Remember that? Yeah. And like I said, this movie was released in 1952. This is, we really talk about how culture influences movies and how movies sometimes influence culture. But what you can learn from movies, and if you just pay attention and think critically about what's going on in this movie and apply it today, they understood high crime, low business investment, no jobs. And one of the things that as we lowered crime in a lot of areas of color where there was a lot of high crime, a lot of gang activity, what you saw was investment roll in and jobs roll in. And people started getting jobs. They did their first job, then they moved on to better jobs. They were getting education. And hope rolled in for many of those people who are people of color. I remember when I was working South LA, when I first went down there to work Century Station, I could not find a Starbucks to save my life. I had to keep driving a little bit out of the area to find. I was addicted to Starbucks at the time. But, crime was actually a lot lower than I expected it to be, and businesses were rolling in, and they opened up the Starbucks while I was still there. And that is what happens when you lower crime.
investment rolls in, opportunities roll in, people get jobs, people go to college, and they understood this 70 years ago. Heck, they probably understood it 100 years ago. And for whatever reason, it's this is not taught in our college. It's not understood in our colleges. It's certainly ignored by our politicians who know better. Interact with them, they know better. They know that's what we did. They were the ones writing the laws and pushing us to implement those laws and make those arrests, and then they turn their backs on us, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But lowering crime increases investment and adds hope to communities that are suffering, or communities, particularly communities of color. That was one of those benefits they got from lower crime, and it impacted and helped them more than anybody else, and nobody ever talks about that. John, you want to add on?
No, I totally agree. There's not. I mean, look at Walmart in Portland. Every store is closed now. Every store in Portland. That's disgusting. Not from Walmart's point of view, but from the people that allow all this crime.
Well, it's for those folks who say, well, they should stay open. Keep in mind, they're owned by shareholders. I'm probably a shareholder of some of those companies in my pension fund and my IRA and some other investments I have. But I'm like a lot of other people. It isn't some rich guys behind some room corporation. It's everyday Americans who are part owners of those businesses, and they don't want to subsidize people or towns where they have unprofitable business. They want to make a profit because their future depends upon it. And Absolutely. That's all reasonable. It's all about the color of green, nothing else. And our leaders have to create a positive business environment. Martin, let's go on to the next one. I don't like the marshal. I really want to talk about this clip.
May I ask you something?
Sure.
Who is Miss Ramirez?
Mrs. Ramirez? She used to be a friend of your husband's a while back. Before that, she was a friend of Frank Miller's.
I see. Thank you. Don't like my husband, do you?
No.
Why?
Lots of reasons. One thing, this place was always busy when Frank Miller was around. I'm not the only one. There's plenty of people around here think he's got a comeuppance coming. You asked me, ma'am, so I'm telling you.
I thought this was just a powerful scene. It's really two things. He's establishing that there's a personal thing going on here between Kane and Miller, right? And because there's a personal thing, it's okay what they're doing to the marshal. It's okay what's going to happen. And I just find that the media and politicians and others and these leftist they go out of the way to find a reason to characterize law enforcement. Like one of the things that Johnny B. brought up, Memphis. These were black police officers who beat and killed a black man who I don't even think it was an offender. It was horrible what they did, but also overseen by a clearly identified progressive black police chief in a progressive town that was predominantly black. And what they did is, instead of saying, hey, there was complete failure all across the board in a deep blue city with deep blue police chief and a minority department. Instead of saying, hey, these were individual failures by individuals and certainly a failure of leadership by that particular police chief, they said, oh, no. It's a culture of policing. It's really this. There's some hidden boogeyman out there that justifies what we say and what we do with law enforcement, instead of just looking at the facts and holding people accountable for who they are and what they do, right? And so they look for this justification to continue piling on the criticism. And I just felt when they characterize that it's okay because there's something going on between him and Miller. It's okay to bash police officers because there's something going on. We can't really quite put our finger on what's going on in law enforcement, even when we've done everything we've asked. We've encouraged people to get education, so law enforcement is more educated than they've ever been. We've encouraged diversity within the workforce, and law enforcement is probably more diverse than most of the professions. that are critical of us, to be honest with you. I mean, I actually I looked at the ACLU for LA just to see just how diverse their leadership was. And it was not at all diverse at all. So the Sheriff's Department and LAPD were far more diverse than the ACLU, who are most critical of us, right? And so they just look for a boogeyman to keep bashing law enforcement and suggesting that there's something there and we got to keep fixing it. But nothing, body cams, those are supposed to be a big panacea. Yet body cams have tended to, for the most part, be relatively supportive of law enforcement, because law enforcement, for the most part, does a good job. And I just think they keep looking for ways to pull at that thread of support from the community for law enforcement, even when it's unrealistic, even when it's dishonest, and even when it's an exaggeration. Do you kind of agree with that, John?
Yes, absolutely. And the liberal mindset, I remember growing up as a kid, remember the bar arm chokehold that LAPD used to do? Oh, you had to get rid of that because somebody crushed somebody's larynx. Okay, no problem. We changed our training. We did this, did that. We added different types of handholds and everything else. Then we added the taser. Then we added stun bag shotguns, beanbag shotguns. And we've added, and they've even tried, the netting and everything else that you shoot. But now you've got people that want to get rid of all that stuff. When we tried to get armored vehicles from the military, which we do for our SWAT teams, to go into a high crime area where you're being shot at with machine guns, and they want those taken away. And they want the tasers taken away now. They want us back to square one, which means there's going to be more people injured, cops and suspects. They don't want us to be able to do our job. We tried to do it when they complained about, the less lethal. We did less lethal over and over and over. And now they want to take that away. I mean, the mindset is just ridiculous.
Well, I say it's never good enough, because once you improve yourself and you get to a point where you're good and you're still doing the job, then they got to find something sinister in what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Is I think what you're saying, Matt. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's just they raise the bar over and over and make your job more difficult. And I just think that the repercussion of that is that law enforcement no longer does proactive policing because it's too risky. And then, like I said, you make a split-second decision, and now they're being prosecuted. So ultimately, in the end, my dad used to say, it all comes out in the wash, son. In the end, society is the one that suffers. And then, you get California flight. We're out of here. I'm going somewhere else. I'm taking my money and I'm going to go live a peaceful life somewhere else. So they keep raising that bar. They make your job more difficult. They create policy. They create laws that are going to protect criminals. And in the end, the only people that suffer is the community and the society. That's it.
Spot on.
There's a little saying this guy said at the end. The guy, it was kind of a despicable guy. He says, some people are looking for the marshal to get his comeuppance, right? And there is a certain minority. It's a small minority, but they're okay with seeing something bad happen to law enforcement. I like I said, I have my Twitter feed at LASD Jordan, and whenever there's a cop down, there's these crazy people will post some celebratory comment as we talk about our brothers and sisters being down. They're celebrating. They're getting their comeuppance. That's okay for some people. I just think those people are despicable because they're human beings, and we've already talked about their desire to dehumanize law enforcement. But that's what he's talking about. If some people think the marshal, you do the hard work, and you put people in jail, and there's a certain group of people that will do everything they can to undermine you because they just don't like law enforcement, and they don't like authority for that matter. And we run across those guys every single day of our career, because those are a lot of guys we're actually putting in jail. But there is a certain amount of anti-law enforcement sentiment, even in a healthy society. And you see it and hear it. But they understood. They understood when they did this movie that there was a lot of people who hate law enforcement. Can we do the next scene? And it's the mayor betrayal.
Nothing. And if we want to keep it decent, keep it growing, we've got to think mighty clear here today. And we've got to have the courage to do what we think is right. No matter how hard it is. All right. There's going to be fighting when Kane and Miller meet. And somebody's going to get hurt. That's for sure. Now, people up north are thinking about this town. Thinking mighty hard. Thinking about sending money down here to put up stores and to build factories. It'll mean a lot to this town. An awful lot. But if they're going to read about shooting and killing in the streets, what are they going to think then? I'll tell you. They're going to think this is just another wide open town. And everything we worked for will be wiped out. In one day, this town will be set back 5 years. And I don't think we can let that happen. Mind you, you all know how I feel about this man. He's a mighty brave man, a good man. He didn't have to come back here today. And for his sake and the sake of this town, I wish he hadn't. Not one bit. Tomorrow we'll have a new marshal.
Just the look on Gary Cooper as he looked at the mayor and just that absolute betrayal, knife in the back. That scene was so, emblematic of what is going on today. I mean, and he talked, hey, we were 5 years ago, it was crazy, and the Marshal did a great job. And we love him, but we want him to leave. We don't want to support him because we see the opportunities elsewhere. And this particular scene, again, 72 years ago, this scene happened. And the movie was, they are setting this guy up that this was a bad thing that the mayor did, right? And everybody recognizes and who watches the movie. Yet nobody is recognizing in popular society today, in our culture today, that is what's going on. That law enforcement took us, as Matt talked, 1,000 homicides in LA County every year. That's what we were going to work facing. We did the best we can to drop those homicides down to the lowest rates, historic rates that we've ever seen in LA County and ever seen in California. And now it's going up, but we're afraid, we're not sure what we want to do. We think it might impact our business, whatever the reason is that they're doing it, whether they're anti-cop or they're socialists or anarchists, whatever it is they're doing, the stabbing in the back of mainstream politicians who know where they were back in, heck, Joe Biden, our president, supported the crime bill in 1994, the omnibus crime bill that brought in three strikes. The Democratic Party in California were some of the biggest backers and pushers of three strikes in California. In fact, you remember our boss at the time, Sherman Block, he was for three strikes, but he was for a more relaxed three strikes. He wanted to see maybe at least two violent felonies before we did this three strikes 25 years away, where the Democrats, they wanted to capture the crime issue as their political issue. And so they helped push, with Republican support, it was bipartisan, they helped push three strikes in California. It was Bill Clinton who pushed the crime bill in 93 and 94. So the Democrats were heavily in part of it. Now, if you look at what's going on, one of the reasons why I got so angry during one of the campaigns, and so I'll tell this story. I was on the union, right? And so we were affiliated with the Fraternal Order of Police, POPA, our union for supervisors and civilians on the sheriff's department. And the Fraternal Order of Police said that we tried to get a meeting with Hillary Clinton at the time. She was a candidate to be president, to see if she seeks our endorsement, she wants our endorsement. She would not even meet with them. She was one of the biggest backers of the crime bill when her husband was president. She pushed three strikes. She pushed the tough on crime. She pushed the war on drugs. She pushed all of this stuff. Yet when she's running for president, I know I don't want you guys around because politically, I don't think that works for me. I want to try and capture the Obama coalition. So I can't be seen too close to you guys. She meets with Black Lives Matter, but she doesn't want to She doesn't want to meet with the people who she helped push the policies that we enforced both at the federal, state, and local level to get crime down, to deal with the drugs that were flowing into our communities and killing people and giving people a life of addiction. She to me, that mayor, that stab in the back of Marshall Kane by the mayor is just so emblematic of our politicians today, both at the federal and local level. John, what do you think?
Oh, it's, again, the key word is politicians. They say whatever the wind changes, they change their story. She's anti-crime, anti-cop now, but I agree with you about Block, because there turned out there were felons that were out on parole that stole a loaf of bread, literally, and were put in on a 3-strike. That is the stupidest thing I ever heard. And every cop thought that. But, the politicians wanted it hard nosed. And now they're blaming the right for doing all that. It just, whatever wind changes their mind,
Yeah, and and Block, just to clarify, Block was a Republican. He was a Republican sheriff, longtime sheriff. He said, this is a mistake. This will lead to overcrowding. We'll have people who are facing injustice. He understood the challenges and what this policy would bring. But, the Democrats were so focused on capturing that crime as their issue, that they did something about crime, that they took it on and they did it. And now they moonwalk away from those policies, point fingers at police officers, say that they're all racist, they're all corrupt, they're all bad, it's all their fault. They're kind of like the judge who was leaving town. Don't taint me with that tar and feather me because of that, because I was against it. She's against what's that? There was a politician. Well, he was against it. He was for it before he was against it, right? I forget who that was. Maybe it was Biden. He was for it before he was against it. Came out in the campaign thinking of primary, but that's what's going on. Matt, what do you think? Do you think I popped the script of that?
And let's look at real life examples. So let's look at Garcia of Los Angeles. Okay, just look at his record. When I think of that mayor's speech there in the movie, I just think about the George Floyd riots when I saw like 14 LAPD radio cars burning on Figueroa or whatever it was, right? I literally wanted to jump through the television when I saw that. But, the LAPD chief was told to stand down. They didn't want any problems. So go ahead, burn up the radio cars. So, but look at Garcetti. I personally think he's a disaster in Los Angeles. Homeless explosions of homelessness, LAPD completely handcuffed and neutered, officers leave. There are 1,000 officers down now. Mayor Bass, and I'll reserve comment on her until I get to see what she does or doesn't do. But what happened to Garcetti? Now he's the ambassador to India. He's in the White House taking pictures with Biden and Kamala Harris with his wife and his children. He got rewarded for his poor performance in Los Angeles. So what do you expect? This is what this country wants. This is what they're rewarding. He's the ambassador to India. 1.2 billion people, huge economy, huge culture, huge opportunities for relationships with United States, not the best friends of China. And they put this guy in charge who's a proven failure. So what else do I need to say?
Well, it's just so frustrating because a lot of these people benefited politically from us lowering crime. I remember when we were doing those anti-graffiti details, we were just killing the taggers in California. I mean, we weren't literally killing them, but we were definitely shutting down their crews. And every time I did a press conference, when I raided 300 locations, I did a press conference. We made 70 arrests of taggers and people on probation for tagging who were violating probation. I had no problem getting politicians to come out and talk about how terrible it was and thank you, the law enforcement, for doing a great job. But because that was the flavor of the day, that's what they expected. Now, if I did one of those things, they'd be asking, what's your authority to do this? How come you're doing this? These are poor people who don't understand.
They're artists.
It's a complete flip from what it used to be. Yes. All right. Well, I just thought that was such a cool scene because it just frames the politicians.
Oh yeah, big time.
Then 72 years ago when they released this, or 70 plus years ago when they released it, to where we are today with our politicians today. Feckless, dishonest, and the people suffering the most because of their behaviors are the people in the community right now who are experiencing higher violence and people in the law enforcement profession. Let's bring up the old Sheriff Martin. Let's see what he has to say about this.
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be like you, Mark. You've been a lawman all your life.
Yeah, all my life. It's a great life. You risk your skin catching killers, and the juries turn them loose so they can come back and shoot at you again. If you're honest, you're poor your whole life. And in the end, you wind up dying all alone on some dirty street. For what? For nothing. For a tin star.
Listen, the judge has left town, Harvey's quit, and I'm having trouble getting deputies.
It figures. It's all happened too sudden. People gotta talk themselves into law and order before they do anything about it.
I just love that last line. People got to talk themselves into law and order before they got to do something about it, right? And it took a long time for our policymakers to realize, hey, we need to be more strident in dealing with the war on drugs, when we're dealing with crack, and we need to be a little more strident when we're dealing with crime. Maybe we're a little over strident, like the sheriff said, with 3 strikes. We could have been a little more balanced in how we did that, and we could have dealt with more non-traditional approaches to reduce recidivism. We could have looked at that more. But you know what? What he said is right. People have to experience pain. People have to experience suffering. People have to lose the one grocery store in their neighborhood. People have to lose, unfortunately, family and friends to violence before they talk themselves into maybe this narrative is wrong. Maybe we need to think about a broader picture of what has gone on in the past and take the best of the past with some of the best of what we're trying to do now in our reform and build something that's reasonable and appropriate, but keeps the community safe instead of this ideological bubble that the left is driving that clearly is failing. And, so I just love this. People got to talk themselves into doing the right thing. What do you think about Matt?
Well, I just think that the law enforcement profession, let's just look at television over the last, I don't even know, 30 years. How many cop shows were there on TV? I mean, and I'm talking about there was Live PD, and then, there's spoofs, Reno 911, and a million cop shows going back to Barney Miller, right? And all I could probably research and come up with 50 of them. For a profession that nobody wants to do, people sure are fascinated with what we do. But they don't want to do it because it's a dirty job. It's a dirty job. Look, John, how many people could even stomach one day in the county jail?
Oh, 0.
Seeing a line of men, undressed, and we're asking to view parts of them because they were for security purposes. Humanity, most people can't handle that, man. Yep. They want nothing to do with it. But
yeah, they got dope stuck up somewhere, and you're like, ooh.
Exactly. But they'll watch it on TV, over their dinner or over their tea, and then turn it off and go back to the white collar job and focus on the soccer game this weekend.
Yeah, or work the mental health ward, and you're walking down the corridor, and people are throwing feces at you all over the walls, and you're like, wow, what am I doing here?
It just always has fascinated me when you look at network television and you just see just the number of shows that are either cop related or crime related. One of the biggest shows on Netflix was Breaking Bad, right? And it was about methamphetamine.
Yeah.
We lived it. We were in 1990. We were in the streets when methamphetamine first hit the street. So we live that stuff, and people are fascinated with it, but they just don't want to do it,
Nope.
Well, I love the old sheriff because he says you do this, you do that, and in the end they don't care and right and so that's the first part of his message, and then the second part, people got to talk themselves into doing the right thing, and that's really a completely different mindset that John has talked about. John said it is that, hey, we live by a set of values, we do the right thing. That's what law enforcement officers do. We don't have to talk ourselves into it. We understand what those values are, and maybe that's. They kind of knew it then. You have to have strong values for people to come to the right conclusion quicker. Otherwise, they got to talk themselves into it. John, what do you think of that scene?
Totally agree. The sheriff there, the old sheriff Lon Chaney, he was burned out, done. And back then, $25 a year, $1 a day maybe if you're lucky. He was burned out and he's done. He did his time. He's old. He's probably drinking, smoking away, and I don't want to be involved. They don't pay enough. You can't fault him in the movie, but it's a different time than it is now. But you wouldn't see that. But straight back to what he said, all these cop shows, people are stupid. And some of these shootings, the comments that I see, I read other comments in there from people that aren't in police work. Well, why didn't you shoot him in the leg? And I'm like, oh, geez. And I just, hey, you probably should not watch movies and TVs too much because you have no clue what happens in real life. That sheriff show that we had with Steven Dorff was the posse guy, and they make him the sheriff. Oh my God! I didn't watch more than 2 seconds of that movie, and I turned it off.
A lot of it, of course, escapism. We're just moving to entertain people, and we're taking bits and pieces of law enforcement to influence that cultural.
Well, people are dumb. Yeah. I'm sorry, there are dumb people out there that believe you can shoot a gun out of certain hands. I'm sorry, I ain't Wild Bill Hickok or Billy the Kid shooting guns out of your hand.
I did hear the statistic. I think I said it on Matt's last show. Most police shootings, and this was years ago, I saw this, are over in 7 seconds, and 70% of the rounds are misses by both the bad guy and
that's absolutely correct.
And they're like within 7 feet of each other. I just remember that 777 was very interesting to me. Yep. So close proximity, over very quickly, and most rounds are misses. So one of the reasons why you train law enforcement to shoot center of mass is not to kill, but to stop the threat. So, part of this is an educational piece for the public that we do here on this podcast.
Yeah, everybody thinks we shoot to kill. We don't. That's
we shoot center of mass.
Line that they use in movies.
Yeah, well, and also leftists and liberals and Benjamin Crump and everybody else who's against us. All right, hey, let's bring up the "He's All Alone" clip, Martin. Now, I just love this clip. I know you guys have felt this feeling before, where you end up at a call, and even though you're waiting for your bad guy or your friends to help you out, you're there. You're it. It's on you. You're all by yourself. Whether it just happened that way, or suddenly, you go there thinking everything's okay, and suddenly you're by yourself, right? I mean, I was going into a place where there's domestic violence thing, and we got the woman out. I got in the door, and the guy kicks the door shut, and it locks my partner out. And suddenly I'm in a fight with this guy for several minutes. It's me and him, mano a mano, I'm by myself. And I know you guys have had those kind of situations, and that's what I felt when I saw this. I saw this scene. He's by himself. He knows he's by himself, and he's got a task ahead of him. He's got to face it down. Did you ever go on a call where you felt like you're just completely by yourself, and you're just hoping to hear those sirens roll to back you up, because it's going to get tough?
Oh yeah, especially if you're in an area like Palmdale or Lancaster where backup's a half hour away, or even in the ghetto and working down there, and you got to go into Nickerson Gardens because the guy's shooting, and it's LAPD's area because they didn't go in there. And I just threw a little dig in there. Yeah, I don't know if I should say this online, but yeah, you pucker up quite a bit. You know.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? You ever felt alone like the Marshal Kane did there on a call where suddenly, boom, it's on and you're by yourself and you're just hoping that the guys know you need help and they're rolling, right? And you hear those sirens.
Sure. I worked on the east side of Carson, if you remember, east of Alameda, and that was before there was a bridge, and the train would run. And if the train was running, my help was 3 or 4 more minutes away because they had to go south to 223rd. So I felt more than alone on more one thing. And I'm mature enough now to tell you there was a couple of times where I actually stepped back out of a problem and lived to talk about it. Whereas if I would have engaged, I might not have lived to talk about it.
That was a smarter move.
As an academy instructor, I used to share those stories intimately with the recruits. And, it's not one of those things it's like you want to brag about when you step back. I used to do it for their sake. And I had them years later, 10, 20 years later, approach me and say, hey, I remember when you told me that you stepped back and you lived to talk about it. But the one thing I will say, in contrast to the movie, I love the fact that when I pushed that button, I could get the Army. I love that fact. We're all team players. We all played team sports, football, basketball, baseball. I love being a part of the big family. I'm still part of it. We can go to a barbecue at San Dimas Station today and be accepted and respected. And so in stark contrast to the Marshal there, I knew if I pushed that button and I said the right code, the Army was coming. And that was always
true.
Yeah, you just had to survive for a couple of minutes till they got there, right? And but yeah, I know both of you guys, and I certainly felt that there was times when I'm alone, or me and my partner, like we're in it deep, and we're just trying to survive until the posse or our buddies get there to help us out, So, and I like the way they do this, where they, this is a movie. I like the way they pull back, and nobody is out to help him at all. Nobody. He's on his own, and he knows it. He knows it. That's okay, Martin. Let's bring up the next scene, the looting.
Okay, Chief. There's a question for the panel.
Sure.
Here,
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah. Are there any accurate TV shows or movies regarding law enforcement?
Today I think there's less of them. I remember when I was growing up, there was a Police Story was fairly accurate. It was, based upon some writings by a guy named Joseph Wamba, who's a retired LAPD lieutenant who went into writing, wrote several books. And I
most
felt
of those cases, though, on that show were actual cases that handled by LAPD.
I think those ones are pretty real, but that's old. I wouldn't say that I've seen a lot of really super accurate television shows now, because I liked Law and Order, although it's got a little bit of a liberal bent. I did like the fact that there is gumshoe work and as a detective tracking guys down, and I think they show that fairly in Law and Order, the series, and they show the interaction with the DAs reasonably fairly, although there's a lot of dramatization to what those interactions to make it a little more interesting. I think Special Victims Unit, the commitment to a lot of people that do those types of investigations is demonstrated in that show, and I like that. It's a very personal thing for those people that are working special victims. So if I had to pick current shows, I would say Special Victims with a caveat there. Other shows, I would say Police Story. Do you guys, yes or no? You agree, John?
I totally agree about Police Story. Even Law and Order, a lot of the stuff they do, but like anything, like you said, they have to put their drama into it. But Southland, I thought, was a very good police show. Really showed the guys, the boots on the ground, doing their work. And the one guy, I can't remember his name, big blonde guy, he ended up being in the zombie TV series. He was excellent. And a lot of things that they said were excellent. And it was done properly. Like when he had to talk to a mom whose son called her for child abuse. I mean, he read him the riot act. It was great. But there are a couple things he said, which I would have said, and believe me, I would have been called into my lieutenant's office and said, "What the hell did you say that for?" I didn't, what? And I would have gotten reprimanded, especially with LAPD. They reprimand you for looking at somebody weird. But I think Southland overall was probably about 90 to 95% realistic in everything that I saw on that show.
I'm gonna hold you off on that, Matt, because we got a couple more things we got to do to wrap up. We got 5 minutes left. I'm going to skip the looting clip, but I want to talk a little bit about it. In one of the scenes, it shows the bad guys as they're going to face Marshall Kane, smashing a window and stealing, and then Miller coming up and says, "Can't you wait?" And to me, that was so emblematic. They know they're going to take out the marshal and they're going to pillage the town, right? They know they're going to do that. And so this was 70 plus years ago. They understood when the thin blue line is broken, mayhem is coming, and they demonstrate that in that scene. And the scene also sets up Marshall knows that they're there and it gets ready for him. But I just thought that was so consistent with what is going on today. The looting, when you break that thin blue line, looting is coming, and we see that every day. Hey, Martin, can we bring up the wife scene?
All right, Kane, come on out. Come out of your friend here and get it the way Pierce did.
I'll come out. Let her go.
As soon as you walk through that door. Come on, I'll hold my fire.
Let me set up the scene a little bit. So leading up to this scene, the marshal's taking on these 4 guys, and in a running gun battle, he's taken out 2 of them. But he's pinned down in a crossfire between Miller and I believe this is actually his brother. So he's pinned down in a crossfire. His wife, who had initially abandoned him, comes back to help him, and she ends up shooting one of the bad guys who's trying to kill her husband. And then Miller, the killer, manages to get her and holds her hostage, and then that's when he challenges the marshal to come out, and they have their shootout. What I liked about this scene is, one, it's unrealistic that the wife's going to be shooting somebody in a gunfight. I think that's a reasonable criticism of the movie at the time. But it shows sometimes the people that are going to support you, the only people that are going to support you are your family, the people closest to you. They're the ones that are going to stand by you. And that's what I saw in this scene. This is the person who doesn't believe in violence, but she came back to help her husband. Matt, what do you think of that?
Well, I think the scene was symbolic of true love, right? She was leaving with the other lady who told her, hey, you mean you're going to leave? You're not going to pick up a gun and go protect your husband? And so I think it was symbolic of their love for each other. And she saved his life, right? So that's allowed them to live happily ever after and sail off into the sunset.
And sometimes that's what it's all about. You go to work for your family. Sometimes that you feel like that's the only reason you're going to work is for your family, because the community sometimes turned it back on you, or the politicians have. But I really think that scene showed the relationships and how important family relationships are for law enforcement. Johnny, before I get to comment, I want to show one last scene, and this is the badge scene. So you'll be able to comment on both the family, the wife, and the badge scene. Martin, can we see the last scene?
Chief, I don't think we have enough time for that.
Uh-oh, we don't have enough time. Okay. I'm sorry, we got to wrap up, folks, but in the badge scene, the marshal ultimately throws his badge in the dirt, and he leaves these guys behind, and he's going to ride off in the sunset. Martin, do we have a couple of our minute to show our banners for I Detective and Search Warrant?
Yes. Wait. Okay.
So I Detective is a show I want to encourage our audience to tune into. I Detective, it comes on Wednesday at 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I've been a guest. It's a show for cops, by cops. You can catch it on KGRA Radio. It's a great show, and tune in. And the next show I want to plug is Search Warrant. Now, Search Warrant is a show they talk about. It's all cops that host the show, and they talk about current issues from a cop's perspective. And it is on at 11 in the morning on Wednesdays. It's between 11 and 1, 11 in the morning Pacific Standard Time. So you got to do the math to figure out where that shows, or what time that shows for you. Another great show. Both these shows give you an alternative point of view that you're not going to see in mass media. So, hey, guys, so we're wrapping up. I want to thank you guys for coming on. John, come back again.
Oh, absolutely.
Matt, this is your second time around. Do you have a good time with this?
Great. Thank you for having me again, Chief. And John, it's great seeing you. You look
great seeing you, buddy.
Miss you, brother.
All right. Well, hang on at the end. We'll talk in the after debrief. We'll do a debrief. Martin,
right.
It's all yours.
Those sons of bitches.
Ma, I'm doing a show.